there's not a day in my life that I don't think about him. I remember the very first cry when the doctor slapped him on his backside. Up until his death. And almost every day, I should say every day, even this morning, that's the first thing I think about.
When Katherine Jackson said those words, it no longer sounded like the voice of the matriarch of music's most famous family. It sounded like something much simpler, a mother missing her son. At 96 years old, Katherine has lived through nearly a century of monumental changes, witnessing her children, especially Michael, reach heights few humans ever achieve. Yet, destiny cruelly forced her to endure the ultimate pain of outliving the son she nurtured long before the world crowned him the king of pop. For years, her world had been quiet. But that fragile quiet was completely shattered when she saw the first footage of the recently released biographical film. Seeing her grandson, Jaafar Jackson, step onto the big screen and effortlessly embody his uncle, the elderly mother could not stop the tears from flowing down her face. From the hauntingly familiar silhouette and gentle smile to the sharp, iconic stomp of his feet, Jaafar's transformation was so uncanny that it left her breathless, her heart tightening as if her own flesh and blood son had miraculously come back to life. So what was it about Jaafar Jackson's transformation that moved Katherine so deeply? And what do those tears reveal about a mother's love that never truly stopped waiting for her son? The answer, surprisingly, had very little to do with Hollywood. It began in a quiet, deeply personal moment inside Katherine Jackson's home. Producer Graham King later recalled visiting Katherine, then around 95 years old and using a wheelchair, to show her footage and images of Jaafar Jackson fully transformed into Michael. What happened next stayed with him. Speaking to Screen Rant, King remembered, when I went over to Katherine's house and showed her Jaafar in hair and makeup, and she was so moved. And she was in a wheelchair, and I bent down, and she just said, "That's Michael." It was so touching. Incredible to think that we've achieved that to his own mother. 3 simple words, "That's Michael." Not "he looks like Michael." Not "that reminds me of Michael." For one fragile, emotional moment, something about Jaafar reached past memory and touched recognition. Because what moved Katherine was not only the makeup, not the costume, not even the famous curls. Jaafar recreated not just Michael's appearance, but something far more intimate, the familiar posture, the slight smile, the energy in the way he stood and moved. Small details most people might overlook, but the kind a mother never forgets. In behind-the-scenes footage shared from the film, even the way Jaafar smiled or shifted his body seemed to awaken something deeply emotional for Katherine. And that is what makes this story feel so heartbreaking. This was no longer a grandmother watching a film clip, it was a mother touching a sacred, long-hidden memory. She hugged Jaafar, saying he was the embodiment of Michael, and that the moment brought her healing and pride. Jaafar shared
A really big hug and said how proud she was, and to me that was everything. To have her seal of approval meant the world to me.
For Jaafar, hearing that from Michael's own mother was not just praise, it was the deepest approval he could have received. So why did those small details, a smile, a posture, a familiar look in the eyes, carry such overwhelming emotional power for Katherine Jackson? Because those seemingly fleeting cues belong to a hidden catalog of memories that only the heart of a mother could ever store. Katherine is the one who closely nurtured, protected, and watched Michael grow from a vibrant little boy in Gary, Indiana. While the public only knew Michael Jackson as the legendary king of pop, a fierce global icon commanding stadiums with unmatched power, to Katherine, he remained the shy, gentle, and profoundly gifted son she raised from infancy. In a rare, reflective interview around the mark, she fondly looked back at his early childhood, remembering that even back then,
He had a lot of energy. Always moving around, never could sit still.
Yet, Katherine knew the raw reality of her son's life off camera, a deeply sensitive, vulnerable man who quietly carried the heavy, suffocating weight of global fame. Journalistic records show that she frequently described Michael as being very shy and reserved when not performing, but noted how they would completely transform the exact moment they stepped onto a stage. Katherine understood the profound anxieties, the hypersensitive soul, and the deep emotional scars Michael carried from completely losing his childhood to the relentless pressures of the industry. A life where he often admitted feeling like an animal in a cage was his ultimate anchor through every devastating storm. Standing firmly by his side from his greatest triumphs to his darkest personal trials. Because of these decades of shared history from the very beginning, Katherine's eyes don't just see a calculated cinematic performance or a basic physical resemblance in Jaafar Jackson. She feels the underlying spirit, the familiar family warmth, and the micro details that recall her actual son, treasures that an ordinary audience could never possibly notice. So what did Jaafar, a young man from a completely different generation, do behind the camera to make those deeply hidden memories in his grandmother's heart come rushing back to life so powerfully? Jaafar did not try to imitate Michael Jackson. He tried to understand him. When the early footage and trailer for the highly anticipated Michael biopic were unveiled, the response from the public was nothing short of staggering. Fans who had vividly witnessed Michael perform live during the height of the 1980s and 90s, living through the Thriller, Bad, Victory Tour, and MTV eras, expressed a collective sense of awe, feeling a nostalgic magic they thought was gone forever. One stunned viewer remarked, "You won't believe it until you see it. But from the moment Jaafar stepped into the scene, I was gone. There wasn't a single second where I thought it was still Jaafar. It felt so unreal." Another swept away fan confidently declared, "Michael Jackson movie is an absolute octubre de 10 for me. Jaafar Jackson should get an Oscar." Throughout Hollywood history, countless actors and professional impersonators have tried to mimic the King of Pop, painstakingly copying his sharp choreography, his distinct falsetto, and his changing appearance. Yet, Jaafar Jackson approached the daunting mantle not as an outside performer chasing a career-defining role, but as a devoted family member driven by deep respect, innate understanding, and unconditional love. Reflecting on this monumental responsibility, Jaafar opened up in an exclusive interview with People, vulnerably revealing, "I never dreamed to be an actor or even thought of playing him. But I knew it was a calling." He further emphasized that his lineage didn't grant him a free pass, stating, embodying Michael, "I really had to earn the role and prove to the filmmakers that I was capable of becoming Michael." Essentially, it was starting at the roots and finding the authenticity. Speaking about his intense preparation process in an intimate conversation published by Magazine, Jaafar detailed the sacred sanctuary he built to channel his uncle's spirit. Sharing, "I set up Havenhurst, which is a family home that they lived and grew up in, and I grew up in. Went back there and created a research room. There was a dance room where Michael used to train. I started training there, and I slept in many different rooms in the house just to feel the energy. Without that, I don't think my performance would be what it is, honestly." By immersing himself in the very physical spaces where Michael once laughed, cried, and practiced until his feet bled, Jaafar transformed his preparation into what he profoundly describes as a spiritual journey. This total emotional surrender allowed him to breathe genuine life into the character from a place of internal truth rather than hollow imitation. But as those beautiful, long-lost memories come back to life so flawlessly on the silver screen, do they also awaken a quiet, heartbreaking ache that has never truly left the soul of this legendary mother for the past 2 decades? The bittersweet truth is that while time has allowed Katherine Jackson to gracefully move forward into her twilight years, it has never erased the vivid memory of her son. People often say that time is a balm capable of healing all wounds. Yet, for a mother who outlived her own child, that sentiment rings completely hollow. The agonizing weight of loss never disappears, it simply retreats, burying itself deeply beneath the heavy stillness of old age. Since Michael's sudden passing in 2009, Katherine has rarely spoken of her grief in public. Instead, she has chosen to carry the burden in absolute silence, remaining the unshakable matriarch of the family while her profound sorrow is quietly kept away from the prying eyes of the world. Yet, this deeply protected shield completely shattered when producer Graham King arrived at her home, carrying a private first look of her grandson. As raw, behind-the-scenes family glimpses on Instagram continuously remind us of the tight-knit bonds within the Jackson household, seeing the genetic legacy come alive was overwhelming. The moment King bent down beside her wheelchair and showed her Jaafar in full hair and makeup, the heavy floodgates of a mother's heart flew wide open. Her tearful, breathless exclamation, "That's Michael," was both a beautiful blessing and a sharp, emotional blade. While the uncanny transformation offered her an irreplaceable sense of comfort, allowing her to feel her son's warmth one more time, it simultaneously reawakened the agonizing reality of his permanent absence, proving that the void he left behind remains completely untouched by time. After all these long, lonely years of facing that immense emptiness, what is it that makes this breathtaking moment at 96 years old so profoundly special and sacred to the remainder of Katherine Jackson's life? It is because at this ultimate, fragile chapter of her journey, her heart has completely detached from the superficial grandeur of showbiz. anchoring itself strictly to the quiet sanctuary of family love and spiritual legacy. At 96, Katherine Jackson chooses to live a beautifully serene life, entirely removed from the blinding flashlights of Hollywood. The profound depth of her gentle spirit was warmly illuminated by her daughter, LaToya Jackson, who shared a touching tribute on Instagram, writing, "This lovely lady will be 96 on May 4th. A kind soul that radiates love. An inspiration to us all." For the Jackson children, Katherine has never just been a mother, she is the sacred foundation of their entire existence. Janet Jackson beautifully crystallized this sentiment by describing her as the Queen of Queens in a deeply emotional birthday post on Instagram. Pouring out her heart with the words, "May God's gentle grace surround you today and always, bringing you peace, sweet moments of laughter, and deep comfort in knowing how deeply loved you are. Every year with you is a treasure, and our hearts hold you in the deepest gratitude and love." Today, as Jaafar Jackson and her other grandchildren step into the spotlight to carry the family mantle forward, they fill Katherine's quiet world with an overwhelming sense of maternal pride. As documented in a journalistic report by JubileeCast, she views her grandson's breathtaking transformation into Michael not as a commercial venture, but as a deeply meaningful way to carry on the Jackson legacy of entertainers and performers. For this historic family, the true value of this cinematic milestone does not lie in box office numbers or Hollywood fame, but in the enduring power of unconditional love and unbreakable family bonds, and perhaps, that is the core reason why the choked tears of this elderly mother became so incredibly beautiful, sacred, and filled with an irreplaceable healing power. Those tears flowing down her face were not merely a reflection of enduring grief. They represented a profound, bittersweet release of emotions bottled up for over 16 years. Destiny, in its most merciful design, allowed this resilient matriarch to live long enough to bear witness to this exact moment. At 96 years old, a fragile age where most memories begin to fade into the mist of time, Katherine was granted what many consider a rare, miraculous gift of fate. She survived the devastating storms of the past to see her son's complicated, brilliant legacy treated with the utmost respect and brought to the grand silver screen, not by a stranger, but by her own flesh and blood. Watching Jaafar Jackson seamlessly step into Michael's shoes provided Katherine with a deep, soothing affirmation that her son is still profoundly loved, and that his artistic spirit remains entirely unbroken. The uncanny presence of Jaafar brings an undeniable comfort to her soul, offering a beautiful sense of closure that Michael's vibrant essence is still very much alive, breathing within the private warmth of the Jackson family and shining brilliantly on the screen for the world to see. As the twilight of her long life softly settles in, what profound, everlasting echo does the image of 96-year-old Katherine Jackson standing beside the newly ignited torch of her son's legacy leave behind in all of our hearts? It leaves us with the ultimate truth that a mother's love is completely timeless, outlasting both the blinding glare of fame and the heavy silence of loss. What are your thoughts on Katherine Jackson's deeply moving reaction to seeing her son's legacy live on through Jaafar? We would love to hear your heartfelt reflections in the comments below.